When I found those pictures, everything I thought I knew about my husband, everything I believed to be true about us, fell apart in an instant. It was a Tuesday morning, quiet and still, just like any other. The house smelled like fresh coffee, and the sunlight poured in through the kitchen window, casting soft beams across the countertop. I was just finishing up my morning routine, glancing through some old receipts when I found it. A single photo, carelessly tucked between two papers. At first, I didn't think much of it. I assumed it was one of the countless photos Tom had taken at conferences, work dinners, or corporate events. But then I noticed the woman beside him, her hand casually resting on his shoulder, her laugh frozen in the photo. She was someone I didn't recognize, not from any of the work events I'd been to, not from his colleagues or friends. I flipped the photo over, hoping to find an explanation, a name perhaps, but there was nothing. My stomach dropped, a knot forming in my chest as I set the picture down. The next photo slid out. It was another one from the same night, only this time, Tom was laughing more freely, holding a drink, and this woman was far too close to him. They were laughing together, their faces too intimate for a mere business colleague. It felt wrong. It looked wrong. My mind raced. I quickly scanned through the rest of the papers, pulling out more pictures, all from the same trip he'd been away on. The week-long conference in Miami he had left for last Tuesday. Yet, these pictures weren't from a conference. They were from a party, one with far too much alcohol, too many late-night smiles, and way too much closeness between Tom and his boss's wife. The world seemed to stop spinning. I could hear the rush of blood in my ears as everything around me blurred. I hadn't planned to look through his things, but now that I had seen this, how could I just ignore it? Tom had always been trustworthy, dependable, the kind of man who would never think of straying, or so I thought. But as I looked at these images, my mind screamed at me that there was no misunderstanding. This wasn't just an innocent business trip. This was something far more personal. I had always prided myself on being a trusting wife. I thought I knew my husband, that we shared everything, our hopes, our dreams, our lives. But I didn't know this. I didn't know her. And now I was left with nothing but the weight of a lie I had never seen coming. The worst part? He was due to come home today, acting as though nothing was wrong, as though everything was just fine. How could he? How could he walk through that door, look at me, and pretend everything was normal? I was trembling now, the truth starting to settle in my bones. I didn't know what to do next, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let this go. The hours dragged on in a haze as I tried to sort through the flood of emotions crashing over me. I couldn't bring myself to touch the photos again, though I could still see them, their vivid faces, the way they were laughing together. But that was nothing compared to the betrayal I felt creeping in. I kept busy, too busy, to sit with the truth. I scrubbed the kitchen counters, even though they were spotless. I folded laundry in perfect piles, even though it didn't need to be folded just yet. I had to do something, anything to fill the void, to distract myself from the growing rage inside me. But no matter what I did, my mind kept returning to that photograph, to the realization that Tom, the man I had trusted with everything, my heart, my future, my whole life, had been hiding something worse. He was involved with her, his boss's wife, a woman I had never even met. I couldn't imagine what had drawn them together. What made him think it was okay to cross that line? I'd always been a firm believer in confronting problems head on. But the idea of confronting Tom, of asking him about what I had discovered, felt like a punch to the gut. What would I say? How would I even begin to process something like this? Could I even look him in the eye when he walked through that door later today? I didn't know. When the doorbell rang, I froze. My heart skipped a beat, and I was suddenly aware of how quiet the house had become. The doorbell rang again, this time more insistent Tom. I stood up slowly, my legs weak, my hands shaking. I couldn't do this. I couldn't face him with all this anger boiling inside me, with all these questions that had no answers, but there was no choice. I opened the door. He stood there, smiling, carrying his briefcase, looking like the same man who had kissed me goodbye a week ago, his eyes crinkled at the corners with that familiar warmth, the same smile I had loved for years. "Hey, baby, I missed you," he said, stepping inside, reaching out to pull me into a hug. His arms wrapped around me, but I didn't feel the usual comfort. I didn't feel the love I had always felt. Instead, all I could think about was the woman, his boss's wife, smiling next to him in those pictures. I stiffened. My breath caught in my throat. I pulled back, taking a step away from him. "What happened in Miami, Tom?" My voice came out hoarse, quieter than I had intended, but I didn't care. I needed answers. I couldn't just keep pretending everything was fine. Tom blinked at me, the confusion on his face quickly morphing into a frown. "What do you mean?" "You know exactly what I mean," I snapped, feeling the heat rise in my chest. "I saw the pictures, Tom, the ones from your conference. Don't even try to lie to me." His face paled, and for the first time, I saw the tiniest crack in his confident demeanor. "Baby, No," I interrupted, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and hurt. Don't you dare lie to me. You were with her, weren't you? You weren't at a conference. You were at a party having a good time, weren't you? And you didn't think I would find out." Tom's face shifted from confusion to guilt, and I could feel my pulse quickening. The reality of the situation was sinking in with every word he spoke. There was no more pretending, no more lying. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, his eyes dropping to the floor. "I never meant for you to find out like this. I thought I could—" "No," I repeated, cutting him off again. "You thought you could lie to me and keep me in the dark, Tom. You thought I'd never know. You thought it was okay to betray me, to betray us. Well, you were wrong." The words were out before I could stop them, each one a dagger cutting through the silence. The man who had promised to love me, to cherish me, had broken that promise, and now all I could feel was the hollow ache of betrayal. He reached for me again, but I stepped back, holding up a hand to stop him. "No, we're done with this, Tom. I'm done with you." Tom stood there, stunned, his hand still outstretched, like he was waiting for me to fall into it again. But I didn't. I couldn't. The man who had been my partner, my confidant, was standing in front of me like a stranger, and I couldn't ignore that anymore. "You didn't even try to hide it," I said, my voice shaking but steady. "You didn't even try to pretend that you hadn't crossed a line, and then you just expected me to welcome you back with open arms." Tom opened his mouth, but no words came out. The silence hung between us, thick and suffocating. I couldn't bear it anymore. I took a step toward him, closing the gap that had grown so wide between us in just a few moments. "I didn't think I'd find out," he said finally, his voice so small, so unlike the man I knew. It was almost as if he was talking to himself, not to me. I thought you'd never see those pictures. I never meant for any of this to happen. It just happened, and I didn't know what to do." The weight of his words hit me like a wave, but it wasn't an apology. It wasn't an explanation. It was him trying to justify everything, trying to make me believe that it wasn't his fault, that it was something beyond his control. I shook my head, the anger boiling inside me again, hot and overwhelming. "You chose this, Tom. You made that choice. You chose to go to Miami and lie to me. You chose to party, to drink, to get close to her, to your boss's wife. And you thought it wouldn't matter. You thought it was just a harmless fun, right? His eyes flickered with guilt, but there was something else too. Something I couldn't quite put my finger on. But it didn't matter anymore. His guilt didn't matter. His excuses didn't matter. I needed to take control. I couldn't let this drag on. I couldn't let him sweep it under the rug like it was nothing. He had to pay the price for what he'd done. "I'm done, Tom," I said, my voice calm now, the decision made. You don't get to come back into this house like nothing happened. You don't get to apologize and think everything will be okay. You broke something here. You've broken us, and I won't let you hide from that. He stepped back, his face contorting with the hurt of my words, but I didn't care anymore. The tears I had been holding back were no longer for him. They were for me, for the woman I had been before I found out the truth, the woman who trusted too easily, the woman who believed that love was enough. I felt a pang of guilt. A part of me wanted to help him, to console him like I always did when he was hurting. But I couldn't. Not this time. This time, I had to protect myself. "You need to leave," I said softly, more to myself than to him. "I need some space. I need to think." Tom didn't argue. He didn't try to fight me or beg me to reconsider. He just stood there, his face pale and unreadable, as if he were already preparing for the fallout. But I could see the cracks now, and I knew I couldn't fix them. He grabbed his bag, his movements slow, deliberate, as if he were walking toward the edge of a cliff he couldn't avoid. "I'm sorry," he whispered again, but it felt empty this time, like a last-ditch attempt to salvage something that had already slipped through his fingers. I didn't say anything else. I watched him walk out of the door, the sound of his footsteps echoing in the empty space between us. And for the first time in days, I didn't feel the weight of his betrayal bearing down on me. I felt free. But that freedom came with a cost. I knew what came next. I had a choice now. I could let this stay between us, a quiet affair, hidden behind closed doors, or I could expose the truth. I could show everyone exactly what kind of man Tom was. And I wasn't sure which was the right path, but I did know one thing. I wasn't going to carry his shame anymore. I reached for my phone. I sat there for a long time, the weight of Tom's absence pressing in on me, making the silence in the house feel unbearable. I thought I would feel relief, but instead, I felt the sharp sting of betrayal digging deeper into my chest. I didn't know what to do with myself now that I was alone in the aftermath of it all. But one thing was clear. I wasn't going to keep this secret. I had already lived with his lies for too long, convinced myself that everything was perfect when it wasn't. The truth was out now, and it wasn't just mine to carry. Everyone needed to know what Tom had done. I wasn't going to hide it anymore. I picked up my phone, my hands trembling as I scrolled through my contacts. His boss's wife, Melissa, had been at the center of it all. I hadn't met her in person, but from what I could tell from the photos, she was someone Tom had grown far too comfortable with. And now she had to know. She had to understand the damage she had caused, just as much as Tom did. I stared at her name on the screen for a moment, hesitating. Was I really going to do this? Expose it all for the world to see, knowing the fallout would be immense? My mind raced, and for a brief second, I almost put the phone down. I wondered if I could just quietly move on, lick my wounds, and keep this between us. But I couldn't. Not after seeing those pictures. Not after hearing Tom's apologies that meant nothing. He had taken something from me that I couldn't get back, and I was done letting him get away with it. I tapped her name, my fingers cold against the screen. It was time to send the message. I don't know what kind of game you think you're playing, but Tom is not the man he pretends to be. I know about the pictures. I know about everything. You may think he's your secret, but I'm done pretending." I stared at the message, rereading it a few times, each time feeling the weight of the words grow heavier. This wasn't just a confession. It was a declaration of war. A war against the man I had married and the woman who had contributed to my pain. But it wasn't just about vengeance. It was about reclaiming the power I had lost when Tom chose to betray me. I hit send before I could change my mind. The seconds ticked by, and I waited for the dreaded reply. The waiting was agony. I felt my heart thud painfully in my chest as I waited for something, anything, from Melissa. I wanted her to be shocked. I wanted her to feel as exposed as I did, to understand the depth of what she'd done. I didn't know if I was ready for the consequences, but I had already made my decision. The phone buzzed. Melissa's name flashed on the screen. "You don't know everything, but I see you figured it out. Tom and I were just having fun, but if it makes you feel better to expose us, go ahead. I can't stop you, but remember, you're not the only one with something to lose." I stared at the message, my stomach sinking. It wasn't the apology I'd expected. It wasn't the remorse I'd hoped for. No, Melissa had deflected, making it clear she didn't care about the destruction she had caused. And there it was, the final realization. This wasn't just Tom's betrayal. It was hers, too. She didn't care about the damage she had done. She was willing to throw everything away for a few nights of fun at my expense. I took a deep breath and set the phone down. My hands were still shaking, but there was a part of me that felt strangely calm. This wasn't how I had imagined it. I didn't expect the confrontation to feel like a weight lifted off my shoulders, but for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was finally standing up for myself. I wasn't going to let Tom's affair define me. I wasn't going to let Melissa's indifference hold me hostage in silence. Now, I had to face the truth, and there was no going back, but I wasn't afraid anymore. The next few days were a blur of emotions, anger, disbelief, and a strange sense of clarity, all mixed together. The house felt so different now, like a stage set for a play I didn't want to be part of. Tom was still gone, and I knew he'd be back in a few days, but everything had shifted. There was no pretending anymore. I had sent the message to Melissa. I had exposed the truth, and now I was left to figure out what came next. I didn't hear back from Tom. He didn't try to call, didn't try to explain, and I didn't want him to. I knew that the moment he walked back through that door, the reality of everything would settle in, and I wasn't sure I was ready for that. I was still processing the depth of his betrayal, the lies, the broken trust, but there was a fire in me now, a fire that hadn't been there before, a strength I didn't know I had until I found the truth. It was like I was waking up from a long, painful sleep. I had been letting Tom get away with things, letting him think he could hurt me without consequence. But I wasn't that woman anymore, and I couldn't keep living like I was. I spent the days taking control of what I could, the house, the bills, the small things I had let slip when I was caught up in the numbness of my marriage. I realized I had been living in a shadow for so long, catering to Tom's needs, trying to please him, to make sure everything was perfect. And what had that gotten me? A broken heart, a shattered sense of trust, and a man who thought he could lie to me without repercussions. I wasn't going to let him do that anymore. When he came home, it was later than I expected. I was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping a glass of wine, the quiet of the house pressing in on me. I had made dinner, but I didn't feel like eating. I wasn't sure if I even wanted to see him, but I knew I couldn't put this off any longer. The door opened, and Tom stepped inside, looking like the same man who had left a week ago, but to me, he was different now. His smile faltered when he saw me sitting there, and his eyes immediately shifted to the floor, like he knew he had to face me, and that he had no excuse left. May. His voice was softer than usual, and I could hear the hesitation in it. We need to talk. I raised an eyebrow, my lips tight. You're right, Tom. We do. Sit down. He paused, clearly thrown off by my cold tone, but he obeyed. He took a seat across from me, his face drawn, tired. He opened his mouth to speak, but I held up a hand to stop him. Don't bother, I said, my voice firm. I know everything. I saw the pictures. I know what you've been doing. I know about her. Tom's face went pale, his lips pressing together. I didn't mean for it to happen. I never wanted to hurt you, May. You've got to believe me. I shook my head slowly, unable to look at him without feeling that deep ache in my chest. You've hurt me more than you realize, Tom. You didn't just betray me with her. You betrayed the life we built together. You've lied to me for months, and you didn't even care enough to be honest with me. You think sorry is going to fix this? I'm sorry, he repeated, but this time it sounded empty, like he was reciting a script he thought would make it all go away. I stood up, the anger rising inside me again, sharp and quick. I don't want to hear it, Tom. You don't get to play the victim. You don't get to apologize and think that makes everything okay. You broke me, and you need to deal with the consequences of that. He stood up too, his voice rising now. What do you want me to say? That I made a mistake? That I was weak? I don't know what happened, but it wasn't supposed to go this far. I never wanted this to hurt you. Then why did you do it, Tom? I snapped. Why? You had everything. A wife who loved you, a home, a family, and you threw it all away for a cheap thrill. That's the truth, isn't it? He flinched, the words stinging more than I expected. I wasn't thinking. I didn't think about what it would cost. I was stupid, May. Yeah, you were, I said coldly. But that's not enough anymore. I'm done being the woman who forgives and forgets. I'm done with the lies, the secrets. You've taken enough from me. There was silence between us then, the air thick with everything that had been left unsaid. Tom seemed to shrink, his shoulders slumping under the weight of it all. For the first time, I didn't feel like I needed to protect him anymore. I walked toward the door. You need to leave, I said, my voice shaking slightly, but resolute. I need some space. I need to figure out what I want next. And I'm not going to do that with you here. Tom didn't argue. He just stood there watching me. And for a brief moment, I saw a flicker of regret in his eyes. But it didn't matter anymore. The damage was done. I'm sorry, May, he whispered again, his voice thick with emotion. Goodbye, Tom. Tom left that night, his departure more final than I had imagined. There was no shouting, no dramatic words exchanged, just a quiet, painful understanding that our marriage had reached its end. The door clicked shut behind him, and for a long moment, I stood in the entryway, the cold air swirling around me. I hadn't expected it to feel so empty. I had thought I'd be relieved, but all I could feel was the weight of the silence he left behind. I didn't know what to do next. My mind was still reeling from everything, from the pictures, the lies, the confrontations, from everything I had learned about the man I had loved. I wandered through the house, touching things absently, like they were foreign to me now. The couch where we'd sat together on lazy weekends, the photos on the wall of vacations and family celebrations. It was like looking at someone else's life, not mine, not anymore. But I wasn't going to let myself stay in this limbo. I couldn't. The hurt was too raw, too fresh, but the anger was what I was going to hold on to. It was the only thing keeping me grounded. If I didn't let that anger fuel me, I might lose the sense of self I was struggling to cling to. I sat down on the couch, my phone in my hand. The messages from Melissa still sat there, untouched, like a reminder of how far things had spiraled. I didn't feel like sending any more messages. I didn't feel like dealing with her. I didn't need her apology or her explanation. She was just as much to blame as Tom, and her indifference had made it clear that she wasn't worth my energy. But there was something else I needed to do, something bigger. I couldn't keep letting Tom's betrayal be this silent, hidden thing. It wasn't just about him and me anymore. It was about me reclaiming my voice, reclaiming my story. The next morning, I sat at my desk, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I knew what I had to do. I didn't need to explain myself to anyone, but I needed to tell the truth. I needed to be heard. And if people were going to judge me, so be it. I wasn't going to hide anymore. I wasn't going to carry Tom's shame on my shoulders. I wrote a post, and I didn't hold back. I didn't sugarcoat the pain or the hurt. I didn't make excuses for Tom. I didn't even try to protect him anymore. I shared everything, the photos I had found, the lies, the hurt, the betrayal. I told my story, and I let it be known that I wasn't afraid of the consequences. I wasn't going to let this man's actions define me. I posted it. I hit the send button, and the words were out there, floating in the digital world for anyone to see. And as I sat back and stared at the screen, a strange sense of relief washed over me. It wasn't over, of course. I knew that. The fallout would come, the judgment would come, and I would have to face it. But for the first time in days, I felt something other than pain. I felt like I had taken back control. I had been so passive, so willing to forgive, to pretend everything was fine for the sake of my marriage. But that wasn't me, and it wasn't going to be me anymore. Tom had made his choice, and now I was making mine. The doorbell rang again that afternoon, and I didn't even flinch. This time, when I opened the door, it wasn't Tom. It was my sister, Mary, standing there with a look of concern on her face. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice gentle but filled with the kind of understanding that only family can offer. She stepped inside before I could answer, pulling me into a hug that made everything feel a little less heavy. "I'm getting there," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "It's going to take time." But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let myself be broken. Not by him, and not by anyone else. I was going to rebuild. I was going to find my peace again. And no matter how long it took, I was going to find my way back to the woman I used to be. The one who had loved herself enough to walk away when she deserved better. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of emotions, but slowly, everything started to settle. The phone calls with friends and family, the comforting texts, the quiet nights when I could finally breathe without feeling like the weight of Tom's betrayal was suffocating me. It wasn't easy, not by any means, but I was beginning to understand that this pain wasn't something I could run from. It was something I had to face, to feel, and to heal from. In my own time, on my own terms, Tom reached out. Of course, he did. He called a few times, left messages, sent texts. He apologized over and over, each time sounding more desperate, more regretful. But each message felt empty. I didn't need his apologies. They meant nothing now, not after everything had come to light. And when I saw him standing on my doorstep one evening, looking like a man who had lost everything, I didn't flinch. I had no intention of letting him back in. "You need to stop," I said, opening the door only wide enough to speak through. "I don't want to talk to you, Tom. I don't need to hear any more excuses." He looked at me, his face crumpled with guilt, and I could see how much it was hurting him. But that was the thing I had learned through this whole ordeal. I couldn't be the one to shoulder his shame. Not anymore. I wasn't here to fix him. I wasn't here to play the martyr. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I was stupid, May. Please, Please just let me fix this. I'm not the man I was before I... Stop, I interrupted, my voice firm now, more certain than I had been in weeks. You don't get to fix this. You don't get to undo what you did. You broke us, Tom, and no amount of regret is going to change that. He took a step back, the light in his eyes dimming, as if my words had hit him harder than he expected. For a moment, there was silence between us, and in that silence, I felt a strange sense of peace. I don't need to forgive you, Tom, I said, my voice softer now. What I need is for you to leave me alone. What I need is to move forward, without you. He nodded, his lips trembling, and I could see the weight of my words settling over him. I'll leave, he whispered. I understand. And then he turned and walked away, his shoulders slumped in defeat. I watched him go, my heart heavy, but resolute. I didn't feel the relief I expected. I didn't feel the closure that I thought I needed. But I felt something else. Strength I had made it through. I had confronted the truth and stood up for myself. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was healing. I was growing. The days that followed were quieter. I found myself reconnecting with the parts of myself I had lost along the way. I took up hobbies I had neglected, spent more time with friends, and allowed myself the space to breathe. I rediscovered what it meant to be me again, without the weight of Tom's betrayal hanging over me. And somewhere, deep inside, I realized I didn't need him to define my happiness. I had been enough on my own before, and I would be again. It wasn't easy, and there were moments of doubt, moments when I wondered if I had made the right choice. But every time I looked back at the decision I had made, I knew I had done what was best for me. I had freed myself from a lie, from a man who didn't respect me enough to be honest. Now I was in control, and that was something no one could take from me. It's funny, isn't it? How one betrayal can shatter everything, but also how that same betrayal can make you stronger than you ever thought you could be. I've learned that we all have the power to take back control, to rebuild our lives, no matter how much they've been broken. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you loved? How did you find the strength to move forward? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to hear more stories like this.